Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Children of Light podcast. Today is going to be just Josiah, and he's going to be starting off chapter 12. It's just going to be the first 5 verses, so it might be a little bit short, but he's going to jump right into it. Josiah.
All right, thank you, Matthew. So we are now going to start in Acts 12, verses 1 through 5, and we are going to go over the section which describes the martyrdom of James. Now, this would be the martyrdom of the first apostle. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading that. Acts 12, 1 through 5, starting in verse 1. Now, about that time, Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to mistreat them. And he had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword. When he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. When he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out before the people. So Peter was kept in prison, but prayer for him was being made fervently by the church of God. So we're going to go ahead and start in verse 1. Now, about that time, Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to mistreat them. Which Herod? Because there are several Herods. Is this the same Herod that put to death John the Baptist? First of all, I want to note that there are 4 major Herods in the New Testament that are prominently featured. The first of which is Herod the Great, who tried to kill Jesus when he was born. Herod the Great was the father of Herod Archelaus, who was briefly mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew, and Herod Antipas. Herod Antipas was the Herod who had John the Baptist killed and who asked to examine Jesus shortly before his crucifixion in Luke 23, 8 through 12. The Herod being spoken of here in Acts is Herod Agrippa the First, who was the son of Aristobulus the Fourth, a son of Herod the Great, thus making King Herod Agrippa the First the nephew of Herod Antipas and the grandson of Herod the Great. So we don't know here why Herod decided to lay hands on those who belonged to the church. There existed already much tension between the Jews who lived in the region and the leaders appointed over them by the emperors of the Roman Empire, such as with Pontius Pilate and Herod Archelaus and Herod Antipas. So it may have been an act to please the Jewish leaders, who we know from previous parts of Acts are continuing to persecute the church. And then continue on into verse 2. And he had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword. So, in addition to the several Herods, there are also several Jameses. Among these were James the Great, who was the brother of John the Apostle, James the Less, who was mentioned in Mark 15:40, James, son of Alphaeus, who was one of the 12, and James, the brother of Jesus, from Galatians 1:19. This passage plainly states that this James in this passage was the brother of John, thus making him James the Great. So who was this James the Great? So James, being the brother of John, they were both called sons of thunder by Jesus, and they were part of Jesus' inner circle consisting of James, John, and Peter. And so this group has gone around and has seen several miracles that other disciples did not necessarily see, such as the little girl being raised in Mark 5, and Jesus' transfiguration in Matthew 17. And so with this death of James, um, he was one of the first of the 12 and the first apostle to be killed. And for reasons unknown, much like with Herod's general mistreatment of those in the church, we do not know um, why he was killed specifically. But continue on to verse 3. When he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. So the first part of this verse, when he saw that it pleased the Jews, hints that Herod indeed did these horrible things to members of the church to please the Jews and to strengthen his image. Now it is important to note that Herod knew that James was of some importance to the church, being one of Jesus' original 12 disciples. or at least this is inferred from him choosing James specifically to be executed. Seeing that it pleased the Jews, it would make sense that Herod would then target Peter, who might have been seen as one of the major, and if not one of the most important figures in the church at that time. It's also important to look at what the days of the unleavened bread were. These were the days that followed the meal of Passover mentioned in Exodus 23:15. The Passover itself is a time of celebration for the Jews in remembrance of their freedom from slavery in Egypt. Herod may have realized that this time of celebration might have been a good time to do other things to please the Jews even more, like to persecute those in the church. When he had seized them, and this is in verse 4, he put him in prison, delivering him to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out before the people. And again, this is talking about Peter. So the number of squads of soldiers here is important to note. The KJV uses the word quaternion in place of the word squad, which would typically mean 4 groups of 4 soldiers or 16 soldiers in all. So the sheer number of soldiers here highlights Peter as being considered as a significant prisoner, and someone who the people might try and free, or at least um, that was what Herod thought. The latter part of the passage continues to support the idea of Herod doing this to boost his image with the Jews. And in verse 5, so Peter was kept in prison, but prayer for him was being made fervently by the church to God. So we can see just how moved in prayer the early church was during this time in their initial reaction. It's not just a singular prayer here and there, but it was fervently, meaning of great intensity of feeling. And so they prayed in this zealous manner. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matthew to conclude here.
Perfect. Thank you, Josiah, for that great explanation of James' martyrdom and the capturement of Peter. So we're kind of leaving you on a cliffhanger here. So if you want to find out what happens to Peter, tune in next time. We're going to discuss that. We've got some miracles laid out for us. And so tune in next time. And we thank you guys for joining us this time. Have a great day.